Hello and welcome. This testing came about from a forum discussion where a person had an older CPU. I got into a bit of an argument over the importance of cores versus CPU threads. I'm of the opinion that cores matter more than thread count. For example, I expect a 6-core 6-thread CPU to be generally better than a 4-core 8-thread CPU. So I decided to get some first-hand data on it. I don't have the most time in the world, so I just ran one game on my daily driver system. Main specs are on the screen now. The game I chose was Watch Dogs Legion. It is an example of a modern title that supports a lot of features, even if I'm not making use of most of them for this test. It also has a built-in benchmark that reports 1% and 0.1% lows, which were part of the discussion in addition to average FPS. I ran this at 1080p with low preset. I can disable CPU cores and hyperthreading to test various configurations. Note I didn't fix clocks, so the CPU is still free to boost how it likes. In the end I tested 4, 6, 8 and 12 cores with and without hyperthreading, which doubles the number of CPU threads. And here is the summary of results. I only did one run of each of these. If you're playing a game, you're not going to rerun it just to get slightly better frame rates, so there may be more run-to-run variation potential here. There's a lot of information here. The game puts out maximum, average, 1%, 0.1% and minimum frames per second. Maximum can be disregarded, since an instantaneous peak isn't really useful. Likewise for minimum, as it could be affected by transient reasons outside of the game. I'll also drop the 0.1%, as 1% should be more reliable as an indicator. So to simplify, here we have just the average and 1% lows. There are some obvious groupings. I started by following the game's minimum requirement, starting at 4 cores and 4 threads. This sits by itself. Next up we have 4 cores and 8 threads, as was common for quad-core i7 CPUs when quad cores were dominant, and giving near enough the same performance is 6 cores, 6 threads. This was not a common configuration for desktops, appearing on Intel's i5 during Coffee Lake era, and AMD's Ryzen 3500, which wasn't widely sold. Personally, I would expect 6 cores 6 threads to do generally better than 4 cores 8 threads, but the difference is not significant enough to call that. They're practically the same. Moving up to the next pairing, we have 6 cores 12 threads going against 8 cores 8 threads. 6 cores 12 threads moved from the higher end offering of early Coffee Lake era, and is now more typical of mid-tier offerings for some time. It is also the mid-tier of Ryzen offerings. 8 core 8 threads again wasn't common and appeared only in some Coffee Lake refresh offerings. Again, I'd expect 8 cores 8 threads to do better than 6 cores 12 threads, but the results here don't really show that. There may be a slight advantage, but not one that would make a difference in the real world. Going up again, we have 6 cores 16 threads sitting by itself. If the earlier pattern had continued, 12 cores 12 threads might be expected to be similar. The difference isn't that great, with the 1% FPS still in margin of error territory. The average FPS is about 6% higher for 12 cores 12 threads. I think we can say this is significant enough not to be lumped into margin of error. If we look up to 12 cores 24 threads, we don't see a significant change from 12 cores 12 threads. I would speculate that perhaps 12 real cores is the optimum point for this game. We might not see a difference between the similar scenarios earlier because they were CPU limited either way. 8 cores 16 threads may not be optimally going through the work that needs to be done. How about some alternative visualizations? Here we can see the benefit at each core count from enabling hyperthreading. The lowest core configurations show the most benefit, around 20% for 4 cores and 25% for the 6 core case, for both average and 1% lows. At 8 cores this drops to 10% and no significant difference at 12 cores. 25% benefit is higher than I thought. Software like the Cinebench family scales relatively well at around 30% benefit from hyperthreading. It does vary a lot with software, but I expect the overall average to be much lower in general. And finally, here is a similar chart but plotted by CPU threads instead of CPU cores. Not sure this adds too much value, but it reinforces my viewpoint that a lower core count can use hyperthreading to be equivalent to a higher core count without. I'll end it here. I hope this was interesting. Do keep in mind it was only one setting on one system in one game. It probably will not apply to all games, and that will take a lot more testing to get a wider picture. Still, before doing this, I considered a decent 8-core 16-thread CPU to be all you need for high-end PC gaming. Now, I'm not too sure. Maybe more cores could be useful if you want the absolute best in performance. Let me know if you want to see similar for other games. Thanks for watching and see you next time.